I'm very happy to introduce Richard Gasper today for the lecture, who has studied at the Slade between 2001 and 2005 on a BA painting.
Yeah.
And he went on to the Royal College of Art in 2005 to do a master's, and then went on to Rome to get the amazing Sainsbury Scholarship in Sculpture and Painting, 2010 and 11.
Yeah.
And he's currently a lecturer in Kingston at the Kingston University and has exhibited in UK, Europe and US. Recent solo shows include Johannes Vogt Gallery in New York City in 2015, and he's about to have a show coming up at Kinman Gallery in London, opening on 18th of March next week. So please go and see it.
Yeah, please come to the opening.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'll,
yeah, brilliant. I'll start.
And then we'll have questions at the end. And just to announce right now, the Houseman is closed today. We're going to the Jeremy Benton pub afterwards.
Great.
Yeah,
okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. Can you hear me all right? Yeah? Good. Okay, so I was here, I started in 2001. I was accepted into sculpture, but I immediately switched to painting for whatever reason, and then made sculpture. I kind of had to throw this together. It was quite a last minute thing. So a lot of the images I may not really speak that much about, and some of them I probably will go on too long. I wanted to show you work from the word go, really. So right from the beginning at the Slade, things I feel a bit embarrassed about, things which were not successes, and then right up until present day. So 15 years really of work, although there's loads of bits missing because I couldn't find pockets. So alongside making art, I teach, which is great, but that's a more recent thing. And then over the years, to support myself, I've done loads of different jobs, and they've really informed actually the work in many ways. Like I was a cheesemonger for a long time, and I made work about cheese. You'll see that. I was going to list some of the things I've done actually, just so you've got them in your head. So baker, cheesemonger, chef, gardener, fashion editor, removal man, Koenig's Books manager, and then gallery tech for V22, Richard Salmon, Simon Lee, Limoncello, Ibid. And then I've worked a lot for artists, being their assistants, and that obviously informs a lot of things. So William L. Pope, the American artist, Daniel Silver, Gary Webb, Martin Westwood, Ryan Gander, Steve Claydon. And then I've also worked as a fabricator, art fabricator, making works for Rachel Whiteread, Zaha Hadid, Matt Collishaw, tra-la-la-la-la-la. So lots of different things I've done to make money. And those things I think are crucial actually, if you're not necessarily selling work, or you're working with a gallery, all that kind of stuff. So, when I started here, I'll come to that. This image, I'm going to come back to at the end. So this is a postcard, which my father gave to me when I was a little boy, and we used to go up to the Natural History Museum a lot. I lived in London, and I think this is something from the 70s. The show that is going to open next week is called Queen Corinne of Nineveh, and that's the beginning of a poem by John Masefield, and it was like my father's favourite poem. He died quite a few years ago, and the works are based on drawings that I found by him. He wasn't an artist when he was very unwell, mentally unwell. So anyway, I wanted to take a high-res image of the postcard. This is a mock-up, and blow it up to like 5 meters by 3.5. So that's going to fit into the gallery, just so I could. It's almost like trying to go back to childhood. So just make it really big, and it really acts as a sort of backdrop to some of the sculptures and the paintings. But I'll come back to that. So this is right at the beginning. This was 2000. This is like one of the works. I'm like, oh God, what's that about? But it was made really quickly. I was full of adrenaline. It was the end of the first year. And I was really into, at the time, I was really into filming protests. I didn't bring any of the film footage. Couldn't get all those ready. But this was made on May Day, and on that particular May Day there were mega riots going on in London. And it got quite nasty, and I was just filming stuff, and I wasn't trying to get involved, but I did get battened and things. And on the way back from Trafalgar Square, I think we were, I saw this skip with this big kind of like plinth platform, and the people I was with, I was like, can you help me take this to the Slade? And then I just, a lot of people had these policeman helmets. So these are actual policeman's helmets, but like toy ones, plastic ones that you wear. So I had a whole load of those, and I was really kind of angry actually, and I just sort of smashed these holes in and put these helmets on, and then I just had pink and brown paint, which I kind of poured on top, and then they became quite phallic, or a bit like mushrooms, or that kind of thing. And it took about, an hour to make. It was a very quick work. I also worked in collaboration with quite a lot of other artists, and I think that's a really important thing, is actually so I've got back off, is your peers and what happens with them. You do loads of things with them, and you never really know what's going to happen. But I think it's really important to collaborate, really. Anyway, this is something, we made all these shelves and made all these objects and put them on there. And actually at the time I was making, I just randomly picked a few things. I was making like hundreds of works. I was just like really prolific and not really thinking too much about what I was doing. I wanted there to be this spontaneity. I was really interested in a few things: materiality, gesture, a kind of breakdown of mediums, because when you get to the Slade, this is how it was. It's like you had to be like in media, or you had to be in sculpture, and I was like, that's so ridiculous. So for me, it felt like an important thing to kind of throw it all together. But I was interested, materiality, gesture, breakdown of mediums and how they can intertwine, excess, the body, but without necessarily being directly figurative, masculinity and what that kind of meant, because I was really confused about it. And also I was really interested in the term Baroque, not stylistically, but the linguistic origins of the word, which come from a misshapen pearl. And I just found that this really profound image, that you could have this sort of perfect kind of pearl, that's like something classic, which becomes misshapen. And I've kind of always hung on to that, really. Anyway, so I was making a lot of these sort of little paintings like that. This was a work made, again, very quickly. I was in Copenhagen. I'd been asked a friend of mine knew a painter called Talar, and we went out there. We were like squatting in his studio and just making work and stuff. And he's an incredibly generous man. He was also there with Daniel Richter, the German painter. So the two of them were there, and there were some of students of theirs from, I can't remember which school, but one of the German schools. That was quite informative, to be around someone like that with a massive output. and to be living in their studio. That was another kind of very quick work made outside. This was it. It was called the House of Shit, and that was like the doorway in. This was like, these are collages of his in the background. That was a sort of aftermath of a party. But it really struck me because at the time Talal was like blowing up as this massive person. Everyone was talking about him, and I was like, why does he want to invite all these people to be in his studio? And I just thought that was very generous, actually. So this was all that materiality excess. This was a work I made towards my last year of the Slade. It was, again, very quickly made. This sort of weird tent thing that I had this idea of it like a kind of womb. And this was all wet clay with paint on it. And then, and this is the aftermath. And I made this, it was kind of, I didn't really know how to make performance or how to do it, but I was really interested in the idea of creating like a gesture or by a performative act. So I came from the back and I crawled through. I've got the end of the video, which I cringe when I watch it, and it's really badly shot by my friend, but and I had hair. And I can see where I'm starting to go bald. I just like, oh no, that was then. Yeah. And there's people that come in the background and stuff. It's so like, it's just done on a Wednesday evening. It's 2 minutes, but I'm gonna go down. It reminds me, which is not such a good reference, Train Spotting, where he goes down the toilet to retrieve his smack or whatever. Yeah. And then there we go. So yeah, that was the kind of embarrassing work I was making. So then, and yeah, this is actually maybe, I immediately went on to, I got a place at the Royal College of Art to do painting, and I didn't want to do it actually. And everyone around me was like, you need to do this. And I'd done an art foundation, I'd come straight from school, art foundation at Kingston, and then 4-year BA at Slade, and I just had enough. And I didn't want to go on to do that MA, although I'd got a place, and everyone was like, that's great, do it. And I should have just stood my ground and said no, because I didn't enjoy it. I didn't get that much out of it. It was not the right course, and it was too early, So bear that in mind, even if you kind of want to go straight on. I always think you get a lot more out of it when you have a little breather and go and, get a studio in somewhere horrible and, get a bad job, because you appreciate it so much more than when you go back into it. Anyway, so I went, these were some things I'd seen. I was interested in geology. I hadn't seen these for years. I just thought I'd put them in. This is somewhere in Bangkok that I went to. They all had like weird names, like long white hair. And there's a good one here. There's such bad photos, sorry. Little duck in spring, which is quite sweet. But I love that thing of, when you I worked for an artist called Daniel Silva who recarves like old classical busts or finds lumps of stone that look like things. But I really like that thing, when you look at the clouds and you see, a line or whatever. Delicious, have a piece. These were kind of informing, I guess, some of the kind of quite overtly Baroque things that I was interested in. And I was doing all these kind of, things covering my body and things like that. Stuff there's no real relevance to it now, but just thought, and making these big kind of sets where these things would happen. And this, but I wasn't, I was a bit confused, I must say, at this stage. I didn't really know what my work was about. And I think that's fine, really. I was just kind of constantly doing things and not really knowing where I was going. And often, I think, as artists, you're constantly doing that. You're making stuff and you don't know what it's about. And I think it's really important to, no one really told me like that too much, that it's okay to kind of feel like confused actually about what you're doing. So I was also at this time, so this was Royal College, I was working at Koenig Books, which is the Serpentine bookshop, and I was like turning into this sort of art nerd. I knew like every publication and every magazine and all this stuff, so I started to make work using other people's works. So this was a sculpture from a catalogue by Franz West, and then I kind of made this setup where I could take photos of myself and trigger these little smoke bombs. And actually I was doing this at my mum's house. This was like in the summer, setting fire to the place. And then some of them get a bit more dramatic. But again, it's still this thing of kind of gesture and body, but also appropriation, I guess, of other artists' works. And that's another one. So, then this was a show that I did at the same kind of time, which again was all kind of very much focused on the body. I was using a lot of, it was also another thing actually, I was using a lot of this material, polyurethane foam, and it's like a two-part thing. And they were starting to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and then someone came along and told me about this American artist called Sterling Ruby, basically doing exactly the same thing as me, but he was much kind of more well known. And it really I was like, whoa, that's my thing. And this bastard has now got that, and he's in these magazines and stuff. So it's not my thing anymore. So I always think you always come at it at a different angle. But I stopped making work like that. I stopped using that material. It really screwed my head up, and I didn't know what to make for ages. And it's just something to be aware of, that can suddenly come out of somewhere. And I think the best thing is just to carry on making. But the best thing to do is just to try and make it before anyone else does, So, I'd made this kind of, I'd had help actually. I carved this kind of stone head, which was meant to be kind of like a bit of a futurist-looking person, and this was this pump system. So it with black oil, it was just vegetable oil, which I tried to make black. It didn't really work. going through these kind of quite minimal boxes. So I was really interested in the way of activating a minimal space. Quite a sort of classic idea, really. I think I was really into Paul Thek. I don't know if any of you know his work, and people like Eva Hess and Donald Judd. So yeah, it kind of would suck anyway, it was just constantly dripping over him and sucking it out the bottom, out of his head, and going back round through the kind of mechanism. So kind of a bit like a machine, the way in which Corbusier would talk about the factory as a machine, that kind of idea. And that's a bad photo, but that was a part of a section of another work. Again, this polyurethane sculpture in oil. Yeah, I was using photographs as well. So I think that's another thing. When I got here, I decided that I wanted to make everything, and that has remained the same way throughout. And I sometimes freak out and go, I've got this schizophrenic practice, you know. And then actually, over time, you build up these different bodies of work which feel maybe quite separate, and sometimes they come together, sometimes they don't. And slowly over time, I'm just accumulating more and more of each kind of body of work. And I very much did that on purpose. And there were some other people who I was studying here with who work in a similar manner, like Eddie Peake, who was in my year. And we both kind of were like, yeah, we don't want to be pigeonholed. And now it's like bog standard, you know, that's how artists works. But 15 years ago, it wasn't quite so acceptable, I feel, what I felt at the time. So, and that was the foot coming out. So I was taking a lot of photographs and kind of clumping them together. I called it the material world. I still kind of add things to this, although I'm taking less photos at the moment, but it will come back. And trying to kind of make some association with form or somehow. So yeah, it starts off with coconuts, and then lobsters, and then obviously my body, and then goes into like these trees and holes. And the idea was that these things could just carry on and on and on, like this sort of infinite kind of quite baroque thing. Yeah. And these were not photos by me, these were just screen grabs. But I don't smoke cannabis, but I've always found the structures just quite incredible to look at, really. And that was, yeah, this was interesting actually. This was taken in Rome. This was a tree planted by Napoleon, apparently, which all these plane trees lined the way into the Villa Borghese, where he once lived. So yeah, anyway, after that, all that kind of stuff, I just thought, nah, I've got to stop now, because I don't really know what any of this means, or I decided that I had to get some kind of level of, this is not one of my works, by the way, this is a work by Franz West. Sorry, I took it out of a catalogue this morning. But I realised that I wanted to have some kind of functional purpose with the works, and there had to be more of a conceptual strategy to make them, because this sort of quite indulgent thing of just being like, yeah, we just make this and see that, and I felt that it was all a bit maybe lacking meaning, or I'm not really sure, but so I decided to stop making art, kind of, but not really, for a while, and then so I was looking a lot at like someone like Franz West, who'd make a blob but then make it functional, and I found that really interesting. And then this is by Andreas Slomensky. So this is a sculpture welded underwater. There's another one there. So like he would make these works through the process of a ridiculous performance, or not ridiculous, but scuba diving to make a sculpture seems quite full on. So anyway, then I decided I had the opportunity to curate a show, and I didn't want to make it really like a normal show, just like white walls. The show really, I wanted it to be about masculinity, but in a very loose way. So anyway, one of the artists I wanted to be involved in was quite blowing up at the time, was kind of getting quite famous. A guy called Daniel Sinsel, who shows with Sadie Cole. So the first person on the list was him. So I wrote to him and I was like, okay, I want to make this yellow diamond wall with a white carpet and hang your work on it. And it all seemed a bit like I was making a shrine for him. But anyway, he was like, I don't normally do group shows, but yeah, it sounds interesting, so I'll do it. So yeah, this is this gallery with this white carpet I put in, and then this wall with Daniel's work on it, and this is his work on the plinth, which I'll show you in a minute. And then in the background there was this lamp type work, which was made by me. It was based on a design of an existing lamp, which I remade and cut up and re-welded it back together. And this idea that I spoke of at the beginning, like this Baroque pearl, this thing that you could use like very seductive materials, but kind of cut up the material or present it in a kind of haphazard way, was starting to really become a bigger interest. Yeah. So that's Daniel's painting on top of a sort of thorn. Very kind of sexual looking image and kind of dangerous. That's again one of his sculptures, which was an egg with a kind of pasta draped over it. Again, incredibly kind of seductive. This was a work, 2 works, separate artists. Andrew Mania, who probably no one's really heard of. He sort of fizzled away. He was a really interesting artist showing with Ilma Gold, but I'm not sure what's happened to him. Daniel Pastina on the right. So I decided to hang the works very closely together. These are some works that we got lent of Paul Thek. This is a wall by Eddie Peake. So he'd found, so that's like a deflated or half inflated bouncy castle. He wanted a massive one, but we didn't really have the money for that. And it was going to be like this wall and then this castle coming out from the outside of the building, kind of pressing really hard against it, which would have been lovely, but there we go. And in the wall were these little slides, because I think, I'm not exactly sure, but anyway, his family somehow related to Darwin, so they own all of Darwin's slides. And I think Philadel's like a direct descendant or something. So anyway, these are Darwin's slides, which are kind of put into the wall. Yeah. So that's another, I've got probably about 20 images of this lamp now. But this became a really important work for me, how something could be shiny and still yet kind of cut up, and also kind of figurative, like a cut up figure, which always seemed to resemble, for me, my father, who was in and out of health when I was growing up and always being operated on. He was a bit of a kind of medical guinea pig. He had a very bizarre cancer and he had other things, but he continued to work. but he was always going through these very hardcore operations, and these lamps seem to kind of be something to do with him for some reason. Like this sort of thing that you look up to, but it's been like cut up, or it's not quite what you want it to be. Another one. So these walls as well, I should describe actually, sorry, I've made quite a few of these, and I'm doing quite a few this year. They're always devised for two reasons. One, to follow the, if we go back, the existing structures found within a room, and they are also curatorial, so it's always to rehang works on top of them. I'm making some really big versions this year with some really interesting older works like Fontanas and some Yves Kleins and things to rehang those. So that should be a really great project to do. And actually I feel like some of that kind of work is behind me now. Like my palette's changing, the whole work is changing. It's still nice to come back to these older things that you do, and sort of people go, oh, it'd be interesting to do that. Okay, so at the same time, after doing that, I had decided to start making these works. I was really interested, basically, one of the shifts was this idea of somehow introducing function, but also a strategy for making works. So I wanted to start making works which involved, well, firstly industrial design processes, but all cut up and going wrong. I started to make these paintings based, fundamentally they're mainly wall based. A few of them went on the floor. Some of them I just look back and go, ugh, it's really tacky, but that was kind of the point, and it'd be a bit kitsch. They're based on rugs. I'd been round at someone's house and they had this amazing collection of rugs, and they're all hanging on the wall. And I just thought, that's so funny, isn't it? You know, that when a rug becomes nice, you hang it on the wall. And I just thought that shift, I don't really know what the function of a rug is. I mean, it's kind of decorative, but maybe it was used to insulate rooms. You know, there are probably functions. And I just thought, okay, well, that's a strategy. Then I don't need to think too much. I can just go shopping. I said I wouldn't buy the rugs. I would just go shopping, you know, with a camera, or I could go on the internet, or I could do whatever. I could hang out in IKEA, I could hang out in Heels or Habitat, and the ones which make sense, I can transfer into this process. So basically, this is MDF. Some of them are laser cut, some of them are jigsaw cut. So the colours I tend to colour match, but then they're spray lacquered, it's basically, it's like for the way in which you finish furniture. So yeah, this one was the first. So this is 2007, yeah, so they're all sprayed individually. It's a really laborious process. Then it's all kind of put back together again. That was one which went on the floor, based on a zebra rug. That's a really bad photo of one called Bahamas. So these are all like 2008. So this was the work, some of the works. That was one based on a Missoni rug. This is another of these sort of lamps. It's a drawing for a lamp. So these are the kind of works that I got accepted to go to Rome. So the Rome is a residency. It was called the Sainsbury Scholarship. It was for a year. It was at a point where I was miserable. I was really, really finding life hard. I was making these works that cost me a fortune. I was working like horrible hours, and then payday would come, and then I'd go to like these weird people in industrial estates and spend like thousands of pounds to make stuff, and it was just wasn't making sense actually, because you know I wasn't really showing the work, I wasn't with a gallery selling the work, and it was just, a bit confusing, and like, my relationships broke up because of it, because they were like, "You're nuts, why? You have no money, and then you get like £3,000, and then you go and spend all of it, and then you live like without having to pay for the bus. You were just bonkers." But I didn't. It felt like I had to make these things. There was a sort of urgency. Yeah, that was another, which I never made actually. It was going to be based on these big kind of stone grapes. I actually saw something this was like 2008, and I saw someone recently made in a magazine, made this massive sculpture of concrete grapes. It was kind of similar. Again, these kind of sculptures that would lean on things, and they were kind of functional. And I was taking a lot of stock images and playing around with them as well at the same time. So this was when I got to Rome. So I found this, and it's such an amazingly striking image. It's just basically, no, the reason when I got to Rome, and I was so relieved. I'm not religious. I got there the first day, and I went into a church, and I broke down and I cried for like 2 hours, because I was like, thank God I'm out of London, and I'm going to be paid some money, and I have a studio, and I have food, and there's some amazing people around me, like Elizabeth Price had started doing a residency, and anyway, lots of interesting artists and historians, and the setup there is quite a weird kind of setup. There's a lot of people doing lots of weird bits of research, not necessarily contemporary art. Most of it is not. It's very formal. They ring a bell and everyone goes to dinner, and it's odd. Anyway, I moved into this studio, and it was my friend's studio, Celia Hampton, and she was seeing Eddie Peake at the time. Anyway, the first email that came through, I was sat on this chair, on this black and white chair, and then this email comes through, and it's that. And then all these other photos of Eddie kind of posing in different bits of the studio naked, and I was just like, okay, so this is what's been going on in the studio for the past year. This is nice. Anyway, but this is an amazing image, I think. So yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. On the wall, actually, no, the reason I was doing that, because that is a painting on the wall based on that. So this is actually when I came back from Italy, a show, and this is the other thing, like, you kind of, if you curate friends into shows and stuff, then sometimes they start to get like at that time Eddie was becoming really famous, and not famous, but well known. And he was really blowing up, and he curated this show and said, hey, I'd like you to be in it, and that's all kind of quite nice. So yeah, I made this wall. On top of that is a work by Celia Hampton. On the left is, and he's a brilliant artist, Fabian Peake. He doesn't really show much. That was his father. And then Alex de Cunha, that's one of his mock pieces. Yeah, the show was called Ruby, and lots of other good artists in it. This was kind of some of the work I was making in Rome, where I was, I'm not going to show you too many of these, but yeah, these were based, layering up layers of ceramics whilst wet, and really I was kind of considering it a bit like a sort of surgical process, so using compass cutters to cut out sections and peel away bits, and then you couldn't fire them like that, and I didn't have a kiln, so I was casting them into blocks of resin. I made loads of these actually. You can see there like the kind of weird gestural details going on. So yeah, when I came back, I got asked to do this show. I didn't really want to do it, but I don't know why. I was pretty depressed actually when I came back from Italy, because I didn't have any money and I didn't know what I was doing, and I had to go and live with my mother, and it was not fun. But I did get off this show and kind of like went for it, and some of the works worked and some of the works did not work so well. So there was this kind of bit of the gallery. This is the gallery in two parts, and there was this Sainsbury's supermarket, and I kind of wanted to make an extension. Actually, this is when, you know, artists and galleries can fall out a little bit. I decided I wanted to use all these photos that I'd taken a couple of years before, when I had really bad insomnia, and I used to get a bus. I lived in Dalston. I used to get a bus to Billingsgate Market when I couldn't sleep, and just sort of take photographs of fish and things. And I wanted to create this. It was called a title called "The Captain's Out to Lunch, but the Sailors Have Taken Over the Ship," which was taken from a Charles Bukowski book, the American writer, with all these sort of communist undertones really going in it. And I wanted to make this sort of weird extension of the supermarket, which could still look a bit like a supermarket display, but then when you start to unpick it, it all starts to look a bit peculiar. And I didn't want to do it in black and white. It was meant to be like revved up colours and really kind of like, you know, whack the saturation up, and make it quite sort of hallucinogenic, and make it a bit more obviously not a supermarket. But the gallery, who I fell out with, they didn't like it at all. The colour. I mean, they like the black and white images. They like the premise of the idea. But anyway, so we didn't do that. And I made some other works in the show. These were some works I'd made in Rome, which are like these big resin lamps with these sort of photographs again of things like lobsters, which look quite bodily. And then there were these panels, metal panels, with all these sort of bits of metal welded onto the paint. So this very shiny paint would become blackened and scorched. And there were bits of wonky neon that I'd been making, well, with help, I'd been making my own bits of neon, like kind of all gone wrong. And they were meant to be kind of very, like, this sort of attack on someone like Gary Hume, I guess. So there is still this sort of silhouette of a leg and a kind of, maybe like a sort of, I don't know, a torso or a boob, or I'm not really sure. Those sorts of things were going on, sort of subtle nod to figuration. Now I wasn't happy with this work very much. It's another of the lamps, all the mechanisms were cast inside. And this was you get, I mean, this translated much better in Italy, I think, because of in the summer you have all these sunscreens. This was a sunscreen which was cut up and from a car, you know, like a car sunscreen, cast into the resin. Yeah. That was one of the images in the show. I really didn't think of it at the time, but they've quite got that sort of Mapplethorpe kind of quality to them. Quite very fetishy. And these were these coconuts that I was just cutting up with, smashing with machetes, and the caviar. So yeah, then I stopped making art actually. After that show, I decided I'd had enough, and I decided to. I'd worked for like lots of producers, food producers at Borough Market, so I decided to become a chef, and I got a job. After a while, I was doing different chefing jobs, and I got a really good job at a restaurant called Quo Vadis in Soho, and I was just like, that's what I'm going to do now. And I still had a studio, and I was still making bits and bobs, but not really, because when you work as a chef, it's really full on. And then suddenly two things happened. I'd also been teaching at Kingston, but then they were like, we really want you to come in and do more. And I was like, okay. no, because I'm not an artist anymore, and that's not what I do. And they were like, okay, we'll have a think about it. And then I'd also got a phone call from this gallery who I work with now, and they said, oh yeah, we've seen your work, and I'd really like to include it in this group show. And I said the same. I said, I'm not an artist anymore, I'm not doing any of that stuff. And they're like, can we just come to the studio anyway? So I was like, okay, cool. So he came round, and then he really loved this painting, which was kind of really old by then. That was, so when was this? Was this 2014, only 2 years ago, yeah. So he came to the studio, and he saw this work I made in 2007. I was like, okay, can I just take that for the moment? So I was like, all right, you can have it. And then I was also making, because I'd worked as a cheesemonger, I'd taken this cast of a parmesan, and so I was making like these. They were pink. So it's cast in jesmonite and then polished up, because I'd worked for a marble carver, so I knew how to polish marble. You go through all the grades and then you buff it. And it was meant to be like this great big totemic kind of stack, almost a bit of a nod to Brancusi, Brancusi's endless columns, that kind of stuff. So he was like, okay, I really like these. You sure you don't want to do this show? I'm going to show them anyway. And I was like, all right. And then, and then he left the studio, and I'd never sold anything in my life. And he was like, oh, by the way, that big pink parmesan stack, I think I've sold it. And I was like, what? That's bonkers. Okay, so anyway, then we did the show, and it went well. That was this there were lots of interesting artists in the show. I haven't got all their names, but really nice group show. And anyway, I ended up cladding a column in the blue. I had this big pink totem, and I think I had some other work. Anyway, so that went well. Oh yeah, that was a stack of pink parmesans, and that's a black version. So the show went well, and then he was like, if you stop cooking, there's a couple of options really. You could try making more art, and we can see how that goes. And also Kingston were kind of like saying, can you come and do more? So I decided to stop being a chef, and because the money's so bad and it's really tough, and you go bonkers, and I was just like a maniac. You finish at like 12, and then you all go out and get really high, and it was just killing me. It was just like this madness, and you're minimum wage, and it was just grueling, really. So then we did a solo show, and I felt really rushed into it. I'm always feeling like I'm not ready to do things, and then sometimes it's quite good just to do stuff. So this was a black version. There were meant to be these different stacks, different versions of different cheeses, but we had so the room was, this was a big green wall. These were some of the paintings. I'll come to those in a minute. But yeah, there was meant to be like this big blue column of a different cheese, and I had to cast it solid, weighed like 300 kg. And the night before the opening, we had been setting up at about 4 in the morning. It got really late, and we had kind of drilled it into the floor. I had a scaffolding pole, thin one, going through the middle, going up to the top of the roof. And we all left at 4, and the gallery went back to his house and realised that he had left his keys at the gallery. He couldn't get into his house, so he went back to the gallery. He couldn't find his keys, so he decided to wrap himself up in bubble wrap and go to sleep. And in the night, because of the I'm not sure what happened, but this 300 kg sculpture unbuckled somehow because of the heat, because we wedged it into the top, this really tall tower, and it fell, and it missed him by a meter. It would have killed him. It was really scary. So yeah, it just taught me a lesson, like, don't rush really big dangerous things. But
just to say, I don't know how long we have you.
yeah.
So it's about 6 o'clock now. Do you know roughly?
Okay, I've timed. Okay, all right.
So that we
Yeah, yeah.
check out.
Oh right, yeah. Okay, sorry. Yeah, thanks. So I'm gonna. Yeah. So I've got to speed up. Yeah. So anyway, I was making paintings in the same way, but I was. They're all based on quick doodles instead, because I didn't want to be held to that structure of making rug paintings that I felt was really ridiculous then. But I was making these metal rugs, like on the floor. So yeah, this is another one based on a doodle made in hundreds of sections and then all put together again. You can see that's based with 6 pencils all stuck together, making a line. Yeah, that's the original drawing, and then I basically make these templates and then cut them all out. So that's one of the metal zebra rugs, and that's another one. They don't document very well. These were these kind of repetitive Parmesan sculptures, videos, which would be shown like that. Again, like a totem. Bronze Parmesan. More drawings. I want to bring you up just quickly to, this was a show in New York I did last year. Again, I didn't like doing it, there was no sculpture involved, and it was really clinical and like, ugh. But again, they're all based on these drawings. That one I quite like, but so anyway, I got to, this was this fully functioning loo I did in collaboration with Studio Lee, who asked artists to make functioning designs. This was again last year, and with Armitage Shanks. Had all these fresh flowers mashed in it, but arranged in this violent way. I'm making this large sculpture at the moment, which is based on a 2.5 meter sewage pipe, cut, and then you make it in the wax, and I've melted it all, mangled in all these flowers, which will get replaced. So I'm going to be showing that on, and it has some incense and things in it. It's a bit of a weird shrine. So I'm showing that on Friday next week. So anyway, back to this, the postcard, the dinosaur. I'd come to a point where I really was, again, I was a bit sick of making work. And then my mother was moving house. My father, who wasn't an artist, he died when I was 17, but he was always making all these drawings. I found this mad stash of these drawings. I was saying to my mum, why in the late 70s, early 80s did they get really insane? She was like, well, because he was working for the government and he was a lawyer, and he was having to do, he was running the prosecution team against the great train robbers. And he went mad. He was sectioned by the government. He was given electric shock treatment, and he never really recovered from that. And he then developed this terminally ill cancer and died. But in that process, in that time, he was making all these drawings. So anyway, I found all these drawings, and I was like, these are mental. This is one called Peace Comes Dropping Slow. And I thought, well, I've got to use these. No one's ever seen them. So I'm using these. They're scaled, most of them on the back of envelopes. And I thought this is like, because I was feeling like everything was a bit meaningless in my work, or I really needed some other shift to happen. So I'm using these as the basis. They're getting scaled up really quite big. They're like 7 foot by 5 foot, some of these. So they have to get transferred into like these laser files in order to cut them out of the wood. So you do lose certain things, but there we go. That was my grandfather's prize bull, and like this weird drawing of the architecture in his back, and then this abstraction. So they're just these weird, strange things, and I was just like, this is odd. And he would collect a lot of newspaper clippings, so this will be he was really into sailing. That was his big thing. Like, he grew up, he went to a naval school. So this will be silk screened on the wall. That's another one. I think it was a portrait of Napoleon with these abstractions, and then these odd bits of text like "Have a nice day." He was like this really conservative English guy. I'm not sure why he would never say anything like "Have a nice day," and then the edge at the bottom. I think this was when he was on the brink of insanity, actually. So again, using this. These are some more. This is Christmas 1989. It looks so apocalyptic and like, I don't know. And then some more peaceful ones. And then, yeah, I don't think we've got much time. Sorry, I was thinking I was going to whiz through everything, and then I realised I could speak for much longer. This was just a quick drawing for the sculpture, this large bronze sculpture with all these gnarly kind of like Fontana holes, but you get like thistles and lilies shoved into it. So that will be around it. So it's a bit weird to talk about some of these works before they are finished or before they exist, installed, documented. But yeah, if you're around on Friday the 18th, it opens. It's in Shoreditch. So for me, it's a really nice shift away from all that kind of material kind of stuff, all that kind of shiny things. Although I still hang on to some of those processes, I suddenly feel really free to kind of use this mad archive. I've got thousands of drawings by my dad. I don't know, like when he made them all, it was really bonkers, but it's knocked me sideways, and it feels really nice to start working with material that's not mine, and is going to build up this sort of totally different sort of body of things. Cool. All right.
Thank you. Do you want to take a few questions? I mean, the things I just don't know whether somebody else coming in.
No, I know. I think we should finish anyway.
Can we take a few questions?
Yeah, please do.
Are there any questions?
It's all right. Sorry, I sped up quite a bit, and you know what? I've probably spent longer talking about older works that I don't really care about, and then didn't really talk about all the kind of processes involved in the newer stuff. Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Are these drawings going to be pictorial? Are they going to be painted?
Yeah. So they're basically. I go back to. Yeah, they're going to translate into. Anyway, we can roughly see that. They're going to remain like these paintings. Yeah. Again, they're sprayed in this furniture process, but they're not shiny. They're like a dead matte. And then I didn't want to do them like that, but there wasn't time. We decided to do the show 2 months ago, and that really wasn't that much time to prepare. So we just had to go. The gallery said like either 2 months or a year and a half, and I was like, okay, well, let's do it 2 months. The next stage is to kind of, I'm trying to want to get back into painting actually a bit more, but still using these processes. But yeah, they're going to be flat.
Mm-hmm. Like canvases on the wall.
Like canvases, yeah. But they're not, they're like hard. They look like cast toys. They got that kind of vibe to it. So.
What are they made of?
So it's just MDF wood with a lip. But they're sprayed, the way in which they spray it, it takes ages as well. It's like this Baroque, it's like the way a pearl grows. You put layers and layers and layers. So they end up looking a bit like a sort of cast, like a sort of manga Japanese toy or something. They have that kind of quality to them. But the colours are kind of, I like it when the colours are earthy, because then they don't look so synthetic. Yeah. So, yeah. Hey, yeah.
Hi, so just wondering about the photos that you took at Billingsgate.
Yes.
And you said that the gallery that wasn't to make colour was you actually preferred
No. Sorry. No, they didn't really. I think they thought it would be too over the top. I've always been a major kind of colorist. I always I'm a sucker for color and I'm a sucker for materials. I don't know, they just thought maybe they would look more classic or something. I don't know. I think it was just one of those weird things where they just say, no, we're not doing that. And you're like, that's the way it was. But they didn't really explain why. What were you thinking about?
I think they should have at least 6 more.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, let's go get them.
I'm with you.
Yeah. Right. Let's do it now. Yeah. Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, I know it's like 6-ish, isn't it? Is it Friday? What day is it? Is it? No. It is Wednesday. God, no, because I'm just working a lot at the moment. I have no idea what day it is. I thought maybe it's Friday evening. Yeah.
Any other questions?
Cool. Should we round it up?
Shall we round it up?
Yeah.